Archaeological evidence suggests that Cambodia has been inhabited for over 40,000 years. The earliest known civilization in the region was the Funan Kingdom, which flourished from the 1st to 6th centuries CE. Funan was a maritime trading empire that controlled much of the Mekong Delta and southern Vietnam, serving as a crucial link between China and India. The kingdom's prosperity was built on trade, particularly in gold, silver, and luxury goods that flowed through the region's extensive river networks. Following Funan's decline, the Chenla Kingdom emerged in the 6th century, initially as a vassal state before eventually absorbing its predecessor. Chenla represented a shift from maritime to land-based power, with its capital located in the upper Mekong region. The kingdom became increasingly influenced by Hindu culture and Sanskrit learning, laying the groundwork for what would become the magnificent Khmer Empire. The Khmer Empire began in 802 CE when Jayavarman II declared himself a Devaraja and established the foundation of what would become one of Southeast Asia's most powerful empires. Under his rule and that of his successors, the empire expanded dramatically, eventually controlling much of present-day Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and southern Vietnam. The empire reached its zenith under Jayavarman VII, who oversaw massive construction projects and territorial expansion. The most famous legacy of this period is Angkor, the world's largest religious complex, built primarily between the 9th and 10th centuries. Angkor Wat, constructed in the early 12th century under Suryavarman VII, remains one of the world's most remarkable architectural achievements and serves as Cambodia's national symbol. The Khmer Empire was characterized by sophisticated hydraulic engineering, with an extensive network of canals, reservoirs, and irrigation systems that supported a population of over 1 million people around Angkor. The empire's wealth came from rice cultivation, trade, and tribute from vassal states. Buddhism and Hinduism coexisted, with magnificent temples serving both religious and administrative functions. However, by the 14th century, the empire began to decline due to several factors: environmental degradation, overextension of resources, internal conflicts, and increasing pressure from neighboring Thai kingdoms. The final blow came in 1431 when the Siamese captured Angkor, forcing the Khmer court to relocate to Phnom Penh. The post-Angkor period marked a dramatic shift in Cambodia's fortunes. The kingdom, now centered in Phnom Penh and later Adong, became increasingly vulnerable to its more powerful neighbors, Thailand and Vietnam. This era is often characterized as Cambodia's Dark Ages, though recent scholarship suggests the period was more complex, with continued cultural and economic activity. Cambodia found itself caught between expanding Thai and Vietnamese empires, both of which sought to control Khmer territory. The Thai influence was particularly strong in the west and north, while Vietnamese settlers moved into the Mekong Delta in the south and east. This pressure led to frequent dynastic struggles and territorial losses. The introduction of Theravada Buddhism during this period gradually replaced the Hindu-Buddhist synthesis of the Angkor era, fundamentally changing Cambodian culture and society. Buddhist monasteries became centers of learning and cultural preservation, helping maintain Khmer identity during this difficult period. European contact began in the 16th century with Portuguese and Spanish missionaries, followed by Dutch and French traders. However, European influence remained limited until the 19th century, when French colonial ambitions in Southeast Asia began to focus on the region. In 1863, King Norodom I signed a treaty establishing Cambodia as a French protectorate, partly as protection against Thai and Vietnamese encroachment. The French colonial administration brought significant changes to Cambodian society, including the introduction of modern education, healthcare, and infrastructure. However, colonial rule also disrupted traditional social structures and economic patterns. The French implemented a dual system of governance, maintaining the monarchy while exercising real power through colonial administrators. They rebuilt much of Angkor and promoted Khmer culture as part of their civilizing mission, though this was primarily aimed at legitimizing their rule and distinguishing Cambodia from Vietnam and Thailand. Economic changes under French rule were significant. The colonial administration introduced rubber plantations, encouraged rice cultivation for export, and developed transportation networks. However, these developments primarily benefited French colonial interests rather than the Cambodian population, who often faced forced labor and heavy taxation. The colonial period also saw the emergence of Cambodian nationalism. King Sisawaf Manavong and later, King Norodom Sihanouk began advocating for greater autonomy. World War II marked a turning point when Japan occupied Cambodia, briefly ending French control and encouraging independence movements throughout Southeast Asia. Cambodia gained independence from France on November 9, 1953, under the leadership of the young King Norodom Sihanouk. Initially ruling as king, Sihanouk abdicated in 1955 to become head of government while maintaining his father as monarch, allowing him to participate directly in politics. The Sihanouk era was marked by attempts to maintain neutrality during the Cold War while modernizing the country. Sihanouk's policy of neutrality, however, became increasingly difficult to maintain as the Vietnam War intensified. Cambodia's borders were used by North Vietnamese forces, leading to tensions with the United States and South Vietnam. Despite these challenges, the 1950s and 1960s are often remembered as a golden age of Cambodian culture and relative prosperity. Sihanouk promoted arts, culture, and education, and Cambodia experienced economic growth and political stability. The capital, Phnom Penh, became known as the Pearl of Asia for its beauty and cultural vibrancy. However, by the late 1960s, internal and external pressures mounted. Rural insurgencies, economic problems, and increasing involvement in the Vietnam War created instability. The secret U.S. bombing campaign in Cambodia further destabilized the country and radicalized rural populations. On April 17, 1975, the communist Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, captured Phnom Penh and began one of the 20th century's most brutal regimes. The Khmer Rouge immediately began implementing their vision of an agrarian utopia, forcing the entire urban population into rural labor camps and attempting to eliminate all traces of modern civilization. The regime's policies were catastrophic. They targeted intellectuals, professionals, religious minorities, and anyone associated with the previous government. The Khmer Rouge also attempted to eliminate foreign influence, killing ethnic Vietnamese and Chinese minorities. Money was abolished, families were separated, and traditional social structures were destroyed. The human cost was enormous. Historians estimate that between 1.5 and 2 million people died during the Khmer Rouge period from execution, forced labor, starvation, and disease, approximately 1/4 of Cambodia's population. The regime's extreme policies effectively destroyed Cambodia's social fabric, educational system, and cultural institutions. The Khmer Rouge rule ended on January 7, 1979, when Vietnamese forces, supported by Cambodian rebels, captured Phnom Penh. Pol Pot and his followers fled to the Thai border, where they continued guerrilla warfare for another decade. The Vietnamese installed People's Republic of Kampuchea, led by Heng Samrin and later Hun Sen, began the massive task of rebuilding Cambodia. The new government faced enormous challenges: destroyed infrastructure, decimated population, ongoing guerrilla warfare, and international isolation due to the Cold War context. The Vietnamese occupation was controversial internationally. While Vietnam's intervention ended the Khmer Rouge genocide, Many Western nations and China refused to recognize the PRK government, instead supporting the Khmer Rouge's retention of Cambodia's UN seat as part of broader anti-Soviet strategy. During this period, Cambodia slowly began to recover. Schools and hospitals were reopened, agriculture was revived, and basic government services were restored. However, the country remained devastated, with continued fighting between the PRK government and a coalition of resistance groups including the Khmer Rouge. The 1980s saw gradual improvements in daily life for most Cambodians, though the country remained isolated and dependent on Soviet and Vietnamese aid. International humanitarian organizations began providing assistance, helping address the massive refugee crisis and beginning the long process of rebuilding institutions. The end of the Cold War created opportunities for resolving the Cambodia conflict. In 1989, Vietnam announced its withdrawal from Cambodia, and in 1991, the Paris Peace Agreements were signed by all parties. The United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia was established as one of the UN's most ambitious peacekeeping operations. UNTAC organized elections in 1993, which were won by the royalist Fun Sinpec Party. However, the Cambodian People's Party, led by Hun Sen, refused to accept the results, leading to a coalition government. King Sihanouk was restored to the throne, providing symbolic continuity with Cambodia's past. The 1990s were marked by continued instability, with the Khmer Rouge maintaining control over parts of the country until 1998. Economic liberalization began, but progress was slow due to ongoing conflict, weak institutions, and widespread corruption. Hun Sen gradually consolidated power, and by 1997, he effectively controlled the government following a violent coup against his coalition partners. The last Khmer Rouge leaders finally surrendered in 1998, officially ending Cambodia's civil war. Since 2000, Cambodia has experienced relative stability and economic growth, though significant challenges remain. The economy has diversified beyond agriculture to include textiles, tourism, and construction. The rediscovery of Angkor as a World Heritage Site has made tourism a major industry. However, Cambodia continues to face serious problems including corruption, weak rule of law, environmental degradation, and limited democratic space. Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party has maintained power through increasingly authoritarian means, restricting opposition parties and civil society organizations. The Extraordinary Chambers in the Courts of Cambodia was established in 2006 to prosecute former Khmer Rouge leaders, providing some measure of justice for the atrocities of the 1970s. However, the trials have been limited in scope and impact. Today, Cambodia is a lower middle-income country with a young population and growing economy. The country faces the challenges of development while preserving its rich cultural heritage and addressing the legacy of its traumatic past. Environmental concerns, particularly deforestation and climate change, pose significant threats to future prosperity. Cambodia's history reflects the broader Southeast Asian experience of ancient glory, colonial domination, Cold War proxy conflicts, and post-conflict reconstruction. The resilience of the Cambodian people through these challenges continues to shape the nation's path forward in the 21st century.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more engaging historical content.